Welcome. We're going to go through what we reference as special circumstances in regards to the FAFSA at Simpson. I'll explain that in a little more detail in a few minutes. Okay, so again, special circumstances, also referred to as a FAFSA override, is what we're going to be talking about. And my name is Tracy Pavon, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment and Financial Aid at Simpson. I have been at Simpson for 30 years. And I had a son who attended Simpson and graduated a few years back. I have another child in college and another one that graduated as well. So I am just kind of letting you know that, so you know that I've been through this process professionally and also with my family. So sorry about that advancement. So tonight we're just going to do a little overview of special circumstances and overriding the FAFSA, and then we'll have a little time for question and answers, and we'll wrap it up. This is the second in a three-part series that we're doing in financial aid. The next session is Thursday night, 2 nights from now, same time. These are just like 20 to 25-minute little punchy sessions that we're delivering. Thursday, we will be just basically letting you drive and ask questions, and we'll answer. And if there aren't a lot of questions, I will be prepared to give a little timeline. So, of course, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. I did get a chance to review the people who had logged on today, and I know that most of you have already completed your FAFSA, so that's great. And if you haven't, you have until July 1st before you miss any state deadlines, but you'll want to do that as soon as you can so we can get you some numbers. So the FAFSA is truly a snapshot in time. It collects all kinds of data, and it's taking a snapshot of your family's financial situation as it exists today. And since it is a current snapshot, you have to do that FAFSA every year so that we're getting a new snapshot. As you know, it's based upon your 2019 income and tax information. But as we know, sometimes situations can change since 2019, which is 100% what we're talking about tonight. It is always relevant. There are always situations that need a review, but this year particularly relevant because of COVID-19 and so many families suffering financially. So a special circumstance in regard to the FAFSA truly is when there is an unusual situation or a circumstance that is impacting the federal student aid eligibility. Okay, then the federal regulations allow the financial aid administrator or me at Simpson at my discretion to go in and use what they call professional judgment on a case-by-case basis to override the FAFSA. You have to have adequate documentation to make adjustments, and we can go in and adjust the data elements on the FAFSA. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute so it makes more sense. Special circumstances would be conditions that exist that cannot be documented with the FAFSA. So, you know, we're going to go through them again in a few minutes, but you filed your FAFSA based on your 2019 taxes, and both mom and dad had a job. And then COVID-19 hit, and now dad's job has changed and mom is no longer employed. That's a special circumstance, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Typically, you're going to send in a written explanation and documentation to the college's financial aid office. At Simpson, we do have a form if you're interested and you feel like you have a situation that may pertain to you. We will have you send in a form and documentation, and we will review them. Like the next bullet says, we typically will request additional information, and then our decision is final. You cannot appeal to the U.S. Department of Education. They do not have the authority from Congress to override a FAFSA. Only the financial aid administrator does, okay? It's very important for you to know that if your son or daughter is looking at Simpson, and I'm just going to use Iowa State as an example, I have the authority to override the FAFSA at Simpson and Simpson only. I can make a professional judgment on Simpson's behalf. I cannot override Iowa State's FAFSA, nor can they override ours. So if you have special circumstances, you're going to want to reach out to each of the college's financial aid offices that your son or daughter is considering. You're going to hear a special circumstance called a lot of different things, and I wanted to throw some of these names out here because I know that some of your students are looking at more than Simpson. I hope they end up at Simpson, and I wish they weren't looking at any other schools, but I just know that that is not the case in all situations. So you might hear it called a FAFSA appeal, a professional judgment, a FAFSA override, or special circumstance, but really they're all getting at the same thing. So again, the financial aid officer has the ability to perform a special circumstance override, but only for their own college or university. A professional judgment or a special circumstance is the professional opinion of the financial aid officer, and it does require a great deal of documentation. I want to give a few examples that I find a lot. So for example, and we've mentioned this one several times, your FAFSA is based on your 2019 information, and perhaps there has been a loss of employment since then, or a change in jobs and the income is lower. Perhaps since that time you have been divorced. God forbid, there could be the death of a parent or a spouse, eliminating income. Unusually high medical and dental expenses that are not covered by insurance, we can look at that. Sometimes there are extraordinarily high dependent care expenses. So you may have young children that you're paying daycare for, or you may have a parent that you have in a daytime daycare situation that you're paying for. Perhaps you're paying secondary tuition, secondary school tuition for your younger children who are maybe at a Catholic school or a parochial school of some type. This is a very popular one. A lot of families, we know today there are many different blended family situations, and you may be in a situation where you are receiving child support for the child who's going to be attending college. Typically in Iowa, when that student turns 18 or graduates from high school, the child support stops. So we can remove that child support for you. Another situation that we sometimes see is a one-time income that will not repeat itself. That could be an example where, let's say that a family did lose their job and they had to pull down some retirement to make their mortgage payment. They're pulling that retirement down on a one-time basis. They're never going to pull it again. They have documentation of what they did with that money. We could remove that. Another one that we see a lot is unusually high income due to a job that pays on incentive or commission. Here's a great example from a few years ago when that polar vortex went through. We had two parents who were window salespeople, and they had just these phenomenal, crazy good years because everybody was replacing their windows, and they knew that that wouldn't happen again. So we looked at a 5-year income average. So that's just some examples, but really when you're thinking about this, think about, okay, is 19 still fairly reflective of what's happening today, give or take a little, or is my situation a lot worse? And then you would want to reach out again to each of the financial aid offices, not just me, but each of the financial aid offices, to be fair. Document, document, document. So a professional judgment or special circumstance override means that the financial aid officer is overriding a federal document, okay, the FAFSA, and we will require adequate documentation in order to do so. I always tell families that we undergo a huge federal audit every year in financial aid. And the first thing my auditors ask for when they come in is to see all of my special circumstance overrides. I have never in 30 years had an issue, knock on wood, but I document. So the government gives us the authority as financial aid officers to make our own decisions. It's not heavily regulated, but we have to do so with a good conscience and with a lot of documentation. So typically you're going to send me stuff and I'm going to ask for more documentation. I'm going to kind of go back and forth. Never take offense at that. It's not that I don't believe you. I want to protect both you and Simpson College in this process. Okay. And honestly, the financial aid officer is going to walk you through this process. It seems very complicated. It's not. I can help you. I'm happy to do so. Like I said, I've been doing it for 30 years. Just let us help you through that process. So I will open it up to questions, but I want to make sure that you know that this is a legal process, because people always say this seems a little fishy. Not only is it legal, but right now in these COVID times, the feds are encouraging us to really make sure that you know that this situation exists. They want to make sure that we are reflecting your accurate situation. So I will tell you at Simpson, we have a form, and I didn't put this in there, but perhaps Maddie could type in the chat box our Simpson email if you need to be considered for a special circumstance, and also my email. So my email is Tracie, TRACIE That's P as in Paul, A, V as in Victor, O, N as in Nancy at simpson.edu. And then our financial aid one, just because it's easier, is finaid at simpson.edu. So that's abbreviated FINAID. Okay. And I'll go ahead and open it up to questions. We had a lot of questions last week. If you have a question, just feel free to either type it in the chat. Maddie will help me with that, or just unmute yourself and ask, and we'll try to get anything answered that you might have. So we are seeing a lot of self-employed businesses kind of suffer right now. What we're going to require for that is that you send a letter, a detailed letter telling me exactly what happened. If you have any way to show me your income from 2019 versus now, I mean, we're almost at the end of the year. So we could do a couple of things. We could wait until you file your 2020 taxes, and we could just use those. That would be a really simple thing to document. Although I know that businesses sometimes are a little delayed in getting their taxes done. So we could also have you just Excel spreadsheet out what that, and if you have an accountant, that would be great. That could just say, yeah, this is what it's looking like. Detail out what that situation is going to look like. We could go ahead and do the override, and then we can come back later and collect that 2020 tax return to document it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, from what you're saying, my understanding that maybe the 2020 tax return may be the best documentation for you.
It might be in this case. I think so. Yes. Easiest for you too, maybe. But remember, you have to use the 19 tax return. A lot of times we'll have families just say, mine's going to be done in a few weeks. I'm just going to do that. That would not be filling out the form in its legal sense. So yeah, that would be great. And if it's going to be a while before you get that tax return done, we could try to do some type of an Excel spreadsheet. We just need some documentation of, does this make sense? So if your parents do not want to link to the IRS data retrieval tool, is that what the question is?
I'm assuming so. It says they don't want to link to their income, but I'm assuming that it's linking to the IRS tool.
You don't have to link to the IRS data retrieval tool. You can just fill the information in. You do have a larger chance of getting selected for federal verification if you do that. Sounds like a scary thing, but it is not. Just means that we're going to have to require additional documentation before we can get everything done for you. But we can walk you through that process as well. So you do not have to link to the IRS data retrieval tool to do your FAFSA. You can do it without that. Okay. Like I said, I certainly hope this is helpful tonight. We're trying to deliver this in little short snippets like this because the FAFSA can seem so overwhelming and complicated. It isn't, and we don't want you to feel overwhelmed. So again, just little punchy sessions. Thursday, log on if you can for a 15 to 20 minute question and answer. If there aren't a lot of questions, last session there were quite a few. If there aren't a lot of questions next time, we'll just go over a timeline and maybe hit some highlights again. If we have your students' FAFSA, and we have about 600 ready to roll, we're going to mail financial aid awards on Friday, as in 2 days from now, 3 days from now. I think it's Tuesday. So you'll be getting the official notification very soon. I think you're referring to Scholarship Day competitions. And we do invite students who have a cumulative GPA of a 3.75 or higher. So we will have a second scholarship day in January. Maddie helped me, and a third one in February. Right, Maddie?
Yep, we'll actually probably be adding more just because of things that are going on with COVID, and we have to have smaller events. So we'll definitely have a few in January and February.
Okay. So if your student gets a new cumulative GPA in between now and then, which they should be getting a new one very soon, send that immediately to your admission counselor, that transcript. So Dave Williams in this case. And that counselor, believe me, will get to me immediately and say, we need to invite him today, and we can get him invited. Like Maddie said, I sort of forgot that, but we are offering some more additional sessions this year due to COVID and trying to keep our events smaller. And we know that students are just quite honestly a little behind where they've typically been, and we know why. So
I have a question from the chat.
Okay.
So this person wants to know how they're able to confirm if we have received their FAFSA.
Okay. So if you definitely positively want to confirm, just send me an email. I will tell you in terms of the FAFSA, if you did your FAFSA, we will have FAFSAs on Thursday from the weekend. So if you did it just this weekend, or maybe even Monday, we'll have it by Thursday. So there's about a 48-hour delay in the time that the college gets it, and weekends in particular. So we will be going out and pulling in FAFSAs again on Thursday morning. So if we receive a student's FAFSA on Thursday, it will still go in the mail on Friday with that first batch of packages. Your package will come from Simpson in a big envelope, a full size, not a number 10, and it's a folder. It's a whole packet of information, and every form is numbered. I'm really proud of our financial aid package. We consistently get notices and emails from parents, even when their students don't choose Simpson, saying it was the easiest to understand. So we try really hard to make it as easy as possible.
And I wanted to make note too for parents who are on this call, because we obviously communicate with students pretty regularly. When you do receive your financial aid package in the mail, the admissions counselors will be reaching out directly to the students to set up those calls. So maybe if you're a parent on the call, just make sure that you're checking in with them to see if they've gotten any notification from us to sign up, because we'll obviously be talking to hundreds of students over the next few months. So just want to make sure you sign up when you can.
Probably be a lot of Zoom meetings this year, I think, which really, that's one of the positive things that has come out of this is it's really easy to walk a family through visually on the computer now, the packet, and pick up forms and say, I have a deck of cards here because I'm staying in a hotel right now, but hey, did you get this form, and show you.
So will the financial, the financial packages y'all send it out on Friday, is that going to have the new tuition rates and room and board rates for next year in there?
You bet it will. And we did just send a notice to our returning student population yesterday announcing our tuition, room, and board for next year. So we always make sure they get it first. And that's kind of why we held off on notifying freshmen until they could know. We didn't really want to tell them during finals what we were going up. That seemed like a little more stress than they needed to deal with. So
I've got another question in the chat. It says, do you see any tuition and room and board rates lowering as a result of COVID?
Great question. At Simpson, we are not lowering as a result of COVID, but I can tell you last spring, we sent students home in March and we refunded their room and board on a prorated basis. And that was about a $1.5 million refund from the college. Not all schools did that. So we're trying to be very fair. Our expenses have gone up as an institution as a result of COVID, just like most everyone else's. Our sanitizing, our cleaning, we've added a college nurse. Our delivery, online courses are not cheaper to deliver. They are far more expensive to deliver, although we are in person, but we are offering students who feel they are compromised, they can appeal, and we are offering them the chance to take their courses online. So when we don't have a lot of students taking courses online, it is an expense. So we are not lowering our tuition, room, and board as a result of COVID. We wish that we could. It just, our expenses have gone up. Okay, well, thank you all. And if you have specific questions, if you want to know if your circumstance warrants override, just send me an email. Like I said, there'll probably be some back and forth. Don't take offense to that. I'm just making sure that Simpson is protected. And I hope we can continue to work together as we get a plan together to finance your students' education. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Maybe we'll see you again on Thursday.